The man in the charcoal suit was still on the platform when Nadia finally looked up. She had felt him watching for 4 days. The way you feel a draft from a door that hasn't opened yet. Atmospheric, wrong. She'd told herself it was nothing. She'd told herself a lot of things in the last 3 years that turned out to be wrong. "You're the one who helped the old man with the oxygen tank," he said. Not a question. Nadia's hand tightened around her bag strap. She looked at him the way she looked at patients who came in, claiming allergies to every painkiller except one specific one. "Who's asking?" she said. He told her his name. For exactly 2 seconds, the noise of the subway station, the screech of a C train arriving, a child crying 2 benches over, a busker on the stairs murdering a Paul Simon song disappeared completely. Then it came back, louder than before. 6 hours earlier. The C train at 6:47 a.m. smelled like industrial cleaner and someone's leftover jerk chicken, and Nadia Reyes had learned to love it the way you learn to love anything that reliably gets you where you need to go. She took the same seat every morning, third car, facing forward, left side, the one with the slightly broken armrest that nobody else wanted. 12-hour night shift at Mercy General's emergency department ending at 6, train at 6:47, home by 7:20, in bed by 7:40, if the upstairs neighbor wasn't doing whatever the upstairs neighbor did that sounded like rearranging furniture with a forklift. She had optimized her life down to its smallest parts. There was comfort in that. Comfort was what you went looking for when the other things ran out. She was pulling her lanyard over her head still in her scrubs, a habit she'd stopped apologizing for when the man got on at 59th Street. She noticed him the way she noticed anything that interrupted a pattern. He was wearing a suit on a Tuesday morning that cost more than her monthly rent, and he was standing in the middle of the car holding a coffee cup with both hands like someone had told him that was how regular people held coffee cups, and he was concentrating on doing it correctly. He looked at the overhead map, looked at his phone, looked at the map again. He was somewhere between 40 and 45, with the kind of stillness that people who are used to having space made for them carry around without knowing it. Nadia looked back at her phone. 2 stops later, at 72nd Street, an elderly man got on with a portable oxygen concentrator on a rolling cart. He was navigating the gap between the platform and the car with the particular determination of someone who has been told to slow down and has decided he disagrees with that advice. The cart's wheel caught the edge. The man lurched. The cart tilted at an angle that meant it was going to fall in about half a second. Nadia was already up. She caught the cart's handle with one hand and steadied the man's arm with the other. The same 2-point stabilization she used in the ER when a patient started to go down, and she was the closest person standing. She checked the oxygen tubing hadn't kinked. She checked his color. She helped him to a seat, asked if he was okay, and when he said yes, "Thank you, young lady," she said good, told him to make sure the wheel was locked from here on, and went back to her broken armrest. The whole thing took 40 seconds. She had forgotten about it before the train reached 79th Street. What Nadia did not see, because she was already 3 paragraphs into a text from her sister about Thanksgiving logistics, was the man in the charcoal suit, watching her from across the car, with an expression he himself would have been unable to name precisely. Something between recognition and embarrassment. The embarrassment of a person who has been so surrounded by performance for so long that a genuine, unremarked act lands like a change in air pressure. Ethan Caldwell had been taking the C train for 11 days. This was not something he had ever done before, and it was not something his assistant Marcus had been pleased about when Ethan announced it. Marcus had pointed out reasonably that Ethan had a car. Ethan said he was aware. Marcus pointed out the car had been paid for. Ethan said yes, he knew. Marcus had given him the look, the one that said, "I have been your assistant for 7 years, and you still surprise me in ways that are not always convenient," and said nothing else. The truth Ethan hadn't shared with Marcus was that a consultant had told him 3 weeks ago, during a performance review of Mercy General's operations, that the single most persistent complaint from nursing staff was that hospital leadership had no understanding of the lived experience of frontline workers. The consultant had delivered this in the careful language consultants used when telling you something they believed you didn't want to hear. Ethan had said he understood. He did, intellectually, but there was a specific and uncomfortable gap between understanding something and knowing it the way you know what your own kitchen smells like. So he'd started taking the train, not to spy, not to perform research, simply to exist in the same physical space, the same morning, the same exhaustion, the same lurching ride as the people who ran his emergency department. He hadn't told anyone. He'd specifically not told anyone, because the moment you announce you're doing something virtuous, it stops being virtuous and starts being a press release. 11 mornings. He had not spoken to anyone. He noticed the nurse on day 3. Not because she was remarkable looking. Though she had a directness to her posture, even while sitting, that he associated with people who made decisions under pressure for a living. He noticed her because she was the only person in the car who was genuinely resting. Not doom-scrolling, not watching something with earbuds. She sat with her hands in her lap sometimes. She read actual articles. Once she closed her eyes for 4 full minutes, and when she opened them, she looked, briefly, like someone who had remembered where they put something important. He assumed she was coming from a job that mattered and going home to a life that was probably nothing like his. He was correct about both. The oxygen cart moment happened on day 4. He had been close enough to move. He hadn't. She'd already moved. And then she'd sat back down without fanfare, without scanning the car, to see if anyone had noticed, without the micro-performance of doing something good in public that he'd seen so many times in boardrooms and charity galas that he'd started to believe it was the only version. She did it the way she probably did it in the ER, because it needed doing. And she was the nearest competent person, and those were the only 2 criteria. Ethan stared at his coffee cup for a long time after that. On day 9, he noticed the Mercy General lanyard. On day 10, he put that together with a week of observation and felt the unease arrive about 30 seconds after the realization. She works for me, and I've been watching her without her knowing. He rode past his stop that morning, turned around, and spent the whole return trip deciding what to do about it. 2 options: stop taking the train, or say something honest enough to deserve her not being afraid of it. He chose the second because it was harder, and because the nurse who didn't perform her kindness had done something to his sense of what honesty required. Day 11 was the day he got off at her stop. She felt him before she saw him. Nadia was aware of this afterward, with the clinical detachment she applied to her own reactions, the same way she applied it to symptoms. Here is the data. What does it mean? And what it meant was that her threat assessment instincts, sharpened by 3 years of triage and 1 marriage that had ended by teaching her very specifically which warning signs she'd been choosing not to see, had been running a low-grade alarm for 4 days. She'd cataloged it. Man. Expensive suit, same car, same platform, doesn't look at her directly but always knows where she is. She'd been building contingency plans the way she built them for unstable patients. If he does this, I do that. She came off the train and he was there, not blocking her path. Standing 6 feet from the stairs, in a position clearly intended to be non-threatening and almost achieving it. He raised 1 hand, palm out the universal gesture of, I need you to hear me before you make a decision. Nadia stopped, put 3 feet between them, held her bag strap with both hands, and looked at him with the expression she used on patients whose stories had too many right answers. I know how this looks, he said. Good start, she said. Keep going. I've been taking this train for 11 days. You've been on it for most of them. I noticed you. He paused. That sounds worse than I mean it to. What do you mean it to sound like? Honest, he said. I'm trying to say this honestly because you deserve that, at minimum, after whatever the last 4 days have felt like from your side. Nadia assessed him. Color, posture, the specific quality of someone's stillness. He wasn't performing remorse. He wasn't calculating. He looked like a man doing something that was costing him something, which was a different thing from what she'd been bracing for. You work at Mercy General, he said. I know because of your lanyard. My name is Ethan Caldwell. The name landed the way a chart notation lands when you're 3 hours into a shift and you suddenly understand what's been wrong with the patient all night. Mercy General's CEO. She had heard his name the way you hear the names of people whose decisions shape your daily existence without their ever looking at your face in policy emails, in department head summaries posted to the break room board, in the frustrated muttering of charge nurses running mandatory training on a software system designed by people who had clearly never worked a night shift. She looked at him with the expression that came after the one she'd been wearing, not softened, recalibrated. "You've been riding the train to my job," she said, "for 11 days. To understand what it's actually like," he said. "I know how that sounds." "Unusual," she said. "Yes. Why didn't you say something earlier?" He held her gaze steadily. "Because you hadn't done anything that required me to. And then you did." He paused. The man with the oxygen cart. Day 4. A woman pushed past them with a stroller. The busker on the stairs switched to something unrecognizable. "I don't know what you want from this conversation," she said. "Neither do I, exactly," he said. "I know I owed you an explanation. I know you had this flagged as a problem, and I'm sorry for that. Genuinely." He met her eyes. "And your job is not part of this conversation. Not in any way." Nadia studied him a beat longer than was comfortable. Then, "You look like you rode past your stop." He blinked. "I did. You're going back uptown." "Yes." "Okay," she said. "The word didn't mean I believe you. It meant I'm adjusting my assessment. I'm Nadia Reyes. I work your night ER. And if I find out this is a thing you do, I'll report it to HR and it will be detailed and specific." "It isn't," he said. "And you should." "Good." She started toward the stairs, stopped after 2 steps. The oxygen cart, his wheel was locked wrong. You'd have had 2 seconds, not half. She went up the stairs. Ethan stood on the platform until the next train came. Nadia got home, showered, set her alarm, and lay in the dark for 40 minutes before sleeping, turning the conversation over with the same systematic attention she gave to things that didn't yet have a diagnosis. He'd apologized first. He'd given her the out explicitly. He'd known she might report him and said she should. None of that was the behavior of someone running a script. She fell asleep without a conclusion. That was fine. She was good at holding open questions. In emergency medicine, certainty was a thing you worked toward, not a thing you started with. The cafeteria at Mercy General lived in the basement and smelled like every hospital cafeteria in the northeastern United States industrial coffee, something that was either lentil soup or the memory of it, and a cleaning product that the maintenance team had presumably been using since 1987. Nadia ate there on her 3 a.m. breaks because the vending machine on 4 had eaten $12 of her money over 2 years without apology. She was 3 bites into a turkey sandwich she hadn't wanted when she looked up and saw Ethan Caldwell in the cafeteria line. Not his charcoal suit. Dark slacks, collared shirt, sleeves rolled to the forearm, holding a tray with slightly too much care. He ordered coffee from the woman behind the counter, Darlene, 9 years. Always worked the overnight. And Nadia watched him say something that made Darlene laugh, a real laugh, the kind that closed her eyes. He paid, scanned the room, saw Nadia. He made the calculation she'd watched him make on the platform, the quick internal, do I approach or do I respect the space, and walked to a table on the other side of the room, sat with his back partly to her, opened his phone. Nadia ate her sandwich. 8 minutes passed. She said, to the air approximately in his direction, "You can sit here if you want." He turned. She made a brief gesture. He picked up his tray, came over, sat down without making a production of it. "You're here at 3 in the morning, she said. "Board meeting prep," he said. "The quiet hours help." "In the hospital cafeteria. The office feels abstract lately. I've been trying to make things less abstract." He looked at his coffee. "I know that sounds like something a consultant told you to do." "I've had a lot of consultants," he said. "This particular version I arrived at on my own." She assessed him. "What are you actually trying to figure out?" The pause that followed was the kind she'd started cataloging, not defensive, not the delay of someone choosing between versions of the truth. The pause of a person who had the truth and was checking if they were willing to say it. "Why people leave," he said. 22% nursing turnover in the ED this year. I know the number. I don't know the weight of it. He set down his cup. My CFO told me last month that the salary adjustment in March should have fixed it. Like retention is a math problem. It's partly a math problem. What's the rest? Nadia finished her sandwich, folded the wrapper in the neat square. She always made a habit from a mother who believed how you left a table said something about you. Do you actually want to know? I'm in your cafeteria at 3 in the morning, he said. She looked at him steadily. Then, it's the feeling of being invisible to the people making the decisions. You can fix salary and still have nurses leaving because they spent years watching leadership change their workload, their safety protocols, their schedules without ever seeming to understand what those changes felt like on a body that had been standing for 11 hours. She paused. The salary says you know we're undervalued. The other stuff says you still don't see us. The silence had a different weight than the earlier ones. The new charting system, he said. The one we rolled out in January. 4 extra minutes per patient entry. In a 9-hour shift with a patient load of 32, he said. I know. I didn't know 3 weeks ago. The implementation report said adoption was smooth. Adoption was smooth because people complied. Smooth compliance doesn't mean it isn't costing something. He was quiet. Not retreat, she'd learned to tell the difference. The kind of quiet that was absorbing something. I'm going to ask you something, she said. You can say no. Okay. Is any part of this a performance? She held his gaze. Not an accusation, a real question. Because I've watched people in positions like yours decide that proximity to actual work is a brand exercise, and I'd like to know which version I'm talking to. Ethan Caldwell looked at her for a long time. I don't know how to prove a negative, he said. I can tell you what I know. I'm here because something made me uncomfortable and I'm trying to understand it better. What I can't give you is a way to believe me. That's yours to decide. Nadia said nothing for a moment. Rosa's voice in her head gathered data before conclusions. Darlene, she said, the woman at the counter. Yes, you know her name. Something in his expression shifted, not pride, more like caught. She was at a town hall last year. She asked about the parking validation policy for overnight staff, and nobody answered. I looked it up afterward. The policy had a loophole we closed. He stopped. She doesn't know I'm the reason it changed. Nadia looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. The same word as the platform, the same calibration, same rules apply. If this becomes something it shouldn't be. You report it, he said. You should. She stood and gathered her tray. The charting system, there are 2 steps in the admission workflow that are redundant. I've written it up twice. It's been sitting somewhere for 4 months. Who'd you send it to? The implementation feedback inbox. I'll find it. N. Reyes. November and February. She left. Rosa had been at the doorway for some of it. She'd come down for coffee and witnessed enough. She cornered Nadia at the medication station with the expression of someone who had updated their entire working theory of a situation. He knew Darlene's name, Nadia said, before Rosa could start. Rosa thought about this. That's either very good or the second act of a very elaborate performance. I know. What's your gut? My gut isn't the one I trust, Nadia said. That's why I have a checklist. Rosa made a sound that was not quite agreement and went back upstairs. 3 days later, the charting system workflow update came down as a formal change request, attributed to a nursing informatics process review. Nadia's name was not on it. She noticed that her name was not on it. She noticed something else, too. Whatever had happened without him telling her, without waiting to see her reaction, without needing her to know. She filed that data point in the column that was getting harder to argue with. Then the second thing. 2 weeks later, Rosa found the revised nursing schedule new weekend float coverage that had materialized overnight, solving a staffing problem the charge nurses had been flagging for 7 months. The request had come from the CEO's office, marked priority, citing a frontline consultation process. Rosa showed Nadia the email in the break room, door half closed. There wasn't a formal consultation process, Rosa said. No, he's just doing it, without calling it anything. Rosa folded the email with unnecessary precision. Wait, she stopped. Started again. The man who runs this hospital has been fixing things and not taking credit for them. Nadia said nothing. Nadia, I hear you. That's not standard CEO behavior. That's barely standard person behavior. I know, Nadia said in the tone she used when she had already thought something through more carefully than she'd intended to, and the conclusion was inconvenient. The conversation that changed things happened on a Tuesday in March, in a hospital stairwell, which was not where either of them had expected anything important to happen, but which, in retrospect, made sense. Stairwells were the one place in Mercy General where you could talk without anyone turning it into something it wasn't. Nadia had been using the stairs between floors since her second week, partly for the exercise, partly because the north elevator at 7:15 held the night security supervisor who had been telling her the same two anecdotes since October, with the confidence of someone who believed both were improving with repetition. She came down from 4, turned the landing on 3, and nearly walked into Ethan Caldwell. He was sitting on the stairs with his back against the wall, a paper coffee cup between both hands, his phone in his pocket. She had never, in 2 months of increasingly less accidental proximity, seen him doing nothing. He looked up. He looked, she noticed, tired in a way that was different from work. Tired, the particular exhaustion of someone who has been keeping something orderly for a long time and has just become aware of the effort. Hiding, he said. From? Quarterly review. He looked at the cup. The board wants to convert 40 beds on the 3rd floor to higher margin elective surgery capacity. Nadia went still. 3rd floor was ED overflow. She knew exactly what those beds were for. What happens to ED overflow? She said. That's the question I've been sitting in this stairwell for 20 minutes not wanting to answer. He looked up. I'm going to vote no. It'll be a difficult room. Why are you telling me that? Because you'll hear about it either way, and I'd rather you hear it from me. He paused. And because I've been making decisions that affect your job for 2 years without looking anyone in the face when I did it, and that seems worth correcting. Nadia sat down on the step above him. Not close. She wasn't at the point in her checklist where close felt like an accurate signal, but the stairwell was cold and her feet hurt, and the step was there. What does the board want? She said. A CFO who's very good at framing things as inevitable, he said, and 2 members who believe a hospital's job is to generate returns for the people who funded it. And your job is to hold the line. My job is to understand what the line actually is and then hold it, he said carefully. Sometimes those aren't the same thing I thought. She looked at him sideways. You know what nurses call the policy changes that come down from your floor? No. We call it the memo from people who've never had someone die in their arms and then had to make the call, not out loud. In the break room, he was quiet. It's not malice, she said. That's the thing that used to confuse me when I was angrier about it. It's not cruelty. It's that the abstraction works. You can make a very clean argument about bed capacity and patient flow if you've never watched a family receive bad news at a gurney in a hallway because there was no room, and nobody in that argument has to be a villain. I've watched it, he said quietly, twice in the last month. She looked at him. I've been coming down to the ED, he said, observing. I should have told you. You probably should have. I didn't want it to be about me, he said. I just wanted to see. The stairwell was quiet. 3 floors up, through the fire door, someone's pager went off. Neither of them moved. The man with the oxygen cart, Nadia said. His name is Walter. He comes into our ED every 6 weeks for his maintenance visit. COPD, stage 2. His daughter lives in Hoboken. He told me last time that he takes the train because driving makes him anxious now, and he's not ready to stop going places. She paused. That's why I caught the cart, because I knew him. Because names make the difference between catching and not catching. That's what your consultants can't put in a report. He was looking at her with the full attention she'd cataloged over 2 months. The kind that wasn't managing her, wasn't waiting for its turn to speak. I'm going to vote no, he said again. Not to reassure her, to say it out loud where it meant something. I know, she said. She stood, brushed off her scrubs. Good luck with the room. She went up the stairs and did not look back, which was a thing she did deliberately when she needed to not know how someone was looking at her. 3 hours later, Rosa found her at the medication station. Did you hear about the board meeting? Nadia looked up. He voted no. The proposal failed. Rosa held out her phone. The memo used the phrase, "frontline operational realities." That's your language, Rosa said. That's exactly what you said to me last week. People say things, Nadia said. Nadia. Rosa said it with the patience of someone who'd known her for 3 years and was choosing her words carefully. Stop waiting until evidence becomes proof beyond reasonable doubt. This is not a diagnosis. This is a person. Nadia looked at her. The last time I trusted someone before the evidence was in, I spent 14 months untangling a shared lease and learning that "I'll handle it" meant something specific to Daniel that didn't match what it meant to me. Rosa's expression shifted. That's fair, she said. But not every man who doesn't perform his feelings is running the same play as Daniel. Some of them are just, that's... She gestured at the memo. Doing the thing. I know. Gather your data, Rosa said, softer. Just don't gather it so long that the thing you're trying to protect against has already happened differently. The thing Rosa didn't know, the thing Nadia was still figuring out how to hold, was that the real threat wasn't that Ethan Caldwell was running a play. It was that he wasn't. She'd built her defenses against the version that wanted something from her. She had not built them against the version that just kept quietly doing the right thing while she watched. That version was more dangerous. And then the email arrived. She found out on a Friday, not from him. Forwarded through 3 people because Mercy General's communication system worked like a game of telephone designed by someone who believed inefficiency built character. Mercy General's board had opened an inquiry, an anonymous complaint, alleged improper influence on departmental decisions by the CEO, specifically favoritism toward certain frontline staff in process change allocations. The complaint listed the charting workflow, the scheduling update, the parking validation policy. Nadia read it 4 times. Then she closed her phone and went back to Base 7, where her patient's blood pressure wasn't doing what it was supposed to, because the inquiry and everything it raised could wait until she'd handled what was in front of her. The question she couldn't wait on sat in her chest for the rest of the shift. He was going to find out she knew, and she was going to have to decide before that happened whether she was telling him because it was the right thing to do, or because somewhere between the subway platform and the stairwell and a memo with her words in it, she'd started caring what happened to him. She didn't have the answer by the end of her shift. She had the question, and it was the clearest thing she'd felt in 3 years. That scared her more than the inquiry, she told him. Not because she'd resolved the question she hadn't, quite, but because Rosa had said, gathered data, not proof beyond reasonable doubt, and because the man in the stairwell had told her he was voting no before he'd known if she'd care. That was the kind of evidence she knew how to read. She texted him. The number was in her phone from an administrative thread on the charting review. She wrote, "There's something you need to know. Not exactly work, related. Can we talk?" She read it twice and sent it before she could take another pass at it, because another pass would have produced something so precisely calibrated it communicated nothing. He replied in 4 minutes, "Yes, name the place." She said the diner on 153rd Neutral Ground. No one from Mercy General. He said 7 p.m. She said fine. She got there first and took the booth in the back, which told her something about herself she filed for later. He came in at 6:58, saw her, came over, and sat down without looking around the room to see who else was there. She noticed this because it meant his attention was for her and not for management of his own visibility. She showed him the email on her phone. She watched him read it. His face did not do the thing she'd braced for the performance of being blindsided, the reaction calibrated for her benefit. He read it the way she read difficult charts, all the way through, twice, then sat back. "How long has it been in circulation?" he said. "I got it Friday. Original timestamp is Thursday. Do you know who filed it?" "No." She put her phone face down. "Do you?" "I have a suspicion," he said. "A board member who voted for the bed conversion. Someone who operates on the assumption that certain decisions don't get made out of principle. He looked at her. I want to tell you something, and I want you to hear it as information, not as reassurance. Okay. The charting fix, the scheduling, the parking policy, those were the right things to do. They would have been the right things to do regardless of who brought them to my attention. He paused. You brought them to my attention. I can't make that disappear and wouldn't want to. But the decision that they were correct was separate from the fact that it was you. She looked at him for a long moment. I believe you, she said. Then, because she'd decided somewhere between Friday and now that she was done being precise at the expense of being true, that's not the question I've been sitting with. He waited. The question I've been sitting with, she said, is whether I care what happens to you because of the inquiry, because it's unfair, and the answer is yes, but that's not complicated. The complicated part is I'm not sure when that started, and I don't know what to do with it inside the context of everything else. She kept her hands flat on the table, posture the same as always. I have a rule. I've had it for 3 years. Don't trust the evidence until you have enough of it. Don't confuse what someone does for you with who they are. That sounds like a good rule, he said. It's kept me intact. I know, he said it simply, without judgment, and I'm not going to ask you to set it aside. I'm not sure I'd want you to. It's part of what he stopped, adjusted. You've been watching me for 2 months, the same way I watched you for 11 days on the train. Taking notes, checking the data against the story. A brief thing that wasn't quite a smile. I can feel it. It's not unpleasant. What does that mean? It means most people with authority over others have stopped expecting to be observed carefully, he said. It should change how you act. It does, when you let it. He looked at his cup, then back at her. I want to do something before I handle the inquiry. I want to tell you I'm doing it so you know. What is it? I'm going to HR Monday morning and formally recusing myself from any decisions related to your employment, performance review, compensation, or departmental allocation, now and going forward. Permanently on record, independent committee only. He held her gaze. Not because it's required. Because I want the record to be clear that your career is yours and I have never had any part of it and never will. So that nobody, including you, ever has to wonder. Nadia was quiet. She understood what he was giving up. A CEO who voluntarily reduced his own authority over a specific employee was also reducing his ability to advocate for her, to use his position the way positions like his were generally used. He was removing himself from the equation entirely, so the equation could be about her work and nothing else. He was protecting her record with a document that could never be taken back. She thought about Daniel. The flowers that had meant I know I got this wrong. The weekend trips that had meant let's not look at the shape of what's not working. Those gestures had been aimed at her feelings. This one was aimed at her future. Okay, she said. The word had evolved over 2 months. I want to say something back. He waited. I've been careful, she said, because careful is what I know how to be. And I think that was right. I needed to see not what you said, but what you did when no one was making you. The parking policy. The schedule. The board vote. She paused. The fact that you told me you were going to vote no before you knew if I cared. He was very still. I'm not all the way to the other side of careful, she said. I don't think I get there fast, but I'm not where I was on that platform. She held his gaze. That's what I wanted you to know. The diner was not quiet, a table of 4 behind her. A basketball recap too loud above the counter, but the noise disappeared the way noise does, when 2 people in a booth are paying attention only to each other. He did what he said he would do. Monday morning, 7:49 a.m. before the inquiry response, before his 8 o'clock call, Ethan Caldwell went to HR and filed the recusal. No announcement. No mention to her. She heard about it from the HR director, who'd flagged it to the nursing department head as protocol, who'd mentioned it to Rosa, who appeared at the medication station at 3:17 a.m., with the expression of someone whose entire model of a situation had just been updated. He filed it before the inquiry response, Rosa said. The inquiry response went in at noon. The HR thing was 7:49 a.m. Nadia absorbed this. He didn't do it to help his case, Rosa said. The timing means he knew it might complicate his case. make him look like he had something to manage. I know. He did it first. Rosa. She looked at Nadia with the patience of someone who was not going to say finally because she was a good friend. Where are you? Nadia had been thinking about this. I'm at the part, she said carefully, where I've run out of reasons to not trust the evidence. Rosa exhaled the specific exhale that meant finally, and I'm not saying it. Good, she said. That's good. The inquiry resolved in 3 weeks. Insufficient evidentiary basis. The decisions were documented, independent, and defensible. Ethan's name was cleared without a headline, which was how he'd handled it quietly, with evidence, without drama. He texted her the morning the result came through. Resolved. All good. Wanted you to hear it from me first. She wrote back. I know. Rosa has sources. A pause. Then, I'm glad. She had never sent him a text that wasn't logistical. She sent it anyway. The first time they walked somewhere together that wasn't a hospital, it was accidental and then it wasn't. She was coming off a Saturday night shift, 7 a.m., the specific tired that lived below muscle and above bone, the kind that made morning air feel like something you had to negotiate with. He was on the same platform he'd kept taking the train every day he wasn't traveling and had stopped explaining it because there was nothing left to explain. They ended up beside each other in the way that happened when neither person moved away, and when the train came and neither of them got on. She looked at him and he looked at her and she said, The park is 4 blocks. And he said, Yes. They walked through Fort Tryon Park in the early April morning, the Hudson visible through the trees, the city doing the thing it did sometimes, going quiet enough that you could hear birds. They talked about things that had nothing to do with work, and the conversation ranged and doubled back and went sideways, and she found it was the specific finding she'd been working toward, that he was funny in a way that had nothing to do with trying to be. The kind of funny that comes from noticing things at an angle. And that he listened the way she'd suspected but now knew for certain, with a full-body attention that most people only gave things that were useful to them. She told him about Daniel. Not everything, but the shape of it, not this is what he did, but this is what I learned about how I'd been seeing. He didn't respond with sympathy, which she'd half expected and didn't want. He said it sounded like she'd revised a theory that had been wrong, and that it was uncomfortable, but she was good at it now. She thought about that for a while and decided it was true. He told her about his ex-wife, a woman named Claire who had been brilliant and specific and had loved the idea of him more than the reality, something he only understood in retrospect, 2 years out. He said he'd spent the year after the divorce becoming very efficient at things that didn't matter, and then stopped and tried to figure out what did. She said it sounded like he'd revised a theory too. He said yes. The same thing, probably. They got coffee from a truck by the park entrance and sat on a bench, and she thought about how the careful accounting she'd been keeping, the running tally of things he did versus things he said, had been the right tool, and she'd used it correctly. And now she was at the result. The result was that the man sitting next to her at 9 in the morning was exactly what the evidence suggested. Not perfect. Not without the blind spots of someone who has had authority long enough to sometimes forget they have it, but the kind of person who, when you named the blind spot, did something about it instead of arguing about whether it existed. Can I say something? He said. Yes. I don't want this to be the part where I get this wrong. He looked at his cup. I'm aware I have structural advantages in this situation that I don't want to use. And I'm aware that being aware of that doesn't automatically mean I'm not using them. You know what the difference is? She said. Tell me. It's whether I get to set the pace. She held his gaze. And I do. I always have. In this. You've let me. Yes, he said. Because anything else would have been wrong. I know, she said. That's the point. She set her coffee cup on the bench between them. He looked at it, and then at her, and she looked back. And somewhere in that exchange, something shifted in the specific way things shift when two people have been watching each other carefully for long enough that they both know exactly what they're seeing. I'd like to keep doing this, she said. This specifically. Or, whatever this is, she said. The walking, the talking, whatever comes after. Yes, He said, simply, "Me too." She nodded. She did not feel the way she'd felt when she'd decided to trust Daniel, that bright, ungrounded feeling she now recognized as the absence of information. She felt steady, like a diagnosis you've worked toward through careful observation and can finally confirm, this is the thing it is, you have enough, you know how to proceed. What came next was not easy, because easy wasn't the goal. There was the social reality of two people at structurally different levels of the same institution. The formal recusal handled the professional part, but the hallway was its own thing. Nadia handled it directly. She told her charge nurse, privately, that she was seeing Ethan Caldwell, that the HR documentation was on file, and that her work was her own. Her charge nurse said, "He's the one who got the scheduling fixed," and Nadia said, "Yes," and that was the whole conversation. There were the looks. She'd expected them and ignored them with a precision visible enough to communicate this is a deliberate choice, not an oversight. Rosa watched her do it and said afterward it was the most effective non-response she'd ever witnessed. There was the board member, the one who'd filed the inquiry, who made a comment at a hospital function, loud enough to carry, about the CEO's interesting approach to community engagement. Ethan heard it. He turned and said with complete evenness, "Nadia Reyes is a better emergency nurse than this hospital deserves to have, and I am deeply aware of how fortunate we are that she stays. If you'd like to discuss the staffing metrics, I'm available Thursday." The man said nothing. 3 people standing nearby went quiet in a way that meant they'd remember it. Nadia heard about this from Rosa, who'd heard it from someone else. She texted him, "I heard about Thursday." He replied, "It needed saying." She wrote back, "Thank you. You didn't have to." His reply came in 3 seconds. "Yes, I did." She saved that text in a folder on her phone she did not examine too often and had not told anyone about. It was Walter who completed the picture. Walter of the oxygen cart, stage 2 COPD, daughter in Hoboken, too stubborn to stop going places. He came in for his maintenance visit on a Thursday afternoon in May, and Nadia was there, and he recognized her and sat up straighter and said, "You're the one from the train. Caught my cart." "I remember you," she said. "How's the breathing?" "It's breathing," he said, his way of saying fine, for the values of fine that currently apply. He looked at her. "You look different." "I'm the same." "People who are the same don't look different." He said it with the authority of someone who had spent a lot of years in a lot of waiting rooms. Something good happened. She checked his oxygen saturation. "Normal range. Wrote it in the chart. Make sure the wheel's locked when you board," she said. "Every time." He laughed, a real one. She liked the sound of it. She walked him to the lobby herself, which was not required. And in the lobby, she saw Ethan near the wall. He'd been coming down to the ED still, and she'd stopped objecting to it and started finding it, quietly, like having someone in the room who understood the language. He saw Walter, saw Nadia, and made no move to insert himself. Walter saw him and said to Nadia, "That man's watching you." "I know," she said. "Good way or bad way?" She looked at Ethan Caldwell, leaning against the wall with his arms loosely crossed, watching the lobby the way he watched everything, now not managing it, just seeing it, and who looked up when she looked at him and did not look away. "Good way," she said. Walter considered this with the gravity it deserved. "Good," he said, and meant it in the plain and complete way that people mean things when they've lived long enough to stop hedging. The world had changed, and not just for 2 people on a park bench in April. The charting system was fixed. The scheduling gap was closed. 3 nurses who'd been on the edge of leaving had decided to stay, for reasons they probably couldn't have fully articulated, but that had something to do with the accumulated weight of things being different than they'd been. Not solved, not the end of a problem that was decades old, but different, a degree different, which in a department that was always operating at its margins was the difference between holding the line and not. Rosa had applied for a charge nurse position she'd been refusing to apply for 2 years. "The review committee is independent," she'd said, when Nadia raised an eyebrow. Apparently. A pause. "Also, I want the title." "You've wanted it for years." "I wanted to want it safely," Rosa said. "Those are different things." They were, Nadia knew. She was an expert in the difference. What she was learning, what the last 5 months had been, the slow process of learning, was that wanting something safely was not the same as not wanting it. The caution had been right. The checklist had been right. The careful accumulation of evidence before conclusion had been exactly correct, and she would do it again, and she would tell the next person who came to her in the break room at 3 a.m., with the armor already assembled to do the same thing. And also, the checklist had an end. There was a point at which the data was complete, and the diagnosis was clear, and the correct action was to act on it, because the alternative wasn't staying safe, it was refusing the result of your own careful work. She came through the hospital's front doors into a May morning that had gone genuinely warm overnight, the first real warmth of the year, the kind that arrived in New York like a correction rather than a transition. Ethan was on the steps. Not waiting for her, she knew his schedule. He had a 7:30 call, but there in the accidental way that had stopped being accidental. She came down and stood next to him. The city was in the early morning key it hit sometimes. Unhurried, the light at an angle that made everything look like the version of itself it was trying to be. "Good shift?" he said. "Long," she said. "Which is different." She looked at him. "You're going to be late." "Marcus moved the call," he said. "I asked him to." A pause. "I was hoping you might want to walk." She looked at him for a moment. At the man who had spent 5 months doing the right thing consistently and without fanfare, who was now standing on a hospital step in the early morning asking if she wanted to go somewhere. "Yeah," she said. "I do." They walked north, toward the park, in the quiet that belonged to the city before it fully woke, and Nadia thought not for the last time, but with a clarity she'd been building toward for months, that the question was never whether she'd been right to be careful. She had been right. The question was what came after right. The answer was this: the walk, the morning, the person beside her who had earned it step by careful step, which was the only way she'd ever known how to let anyone in. The C train ran somewhere below them. She could feel it through the ground, the way you could always feel the trains in this city below everything. Constant, the thing that kept moving. She kept walking. What I keep coming back to is the 40 seconds. Nadia had forgotten the oxygen cart before the next stop, just the nearest competent person doing the obvious thing, no audience required. And that unremarked 40 seconds is what started all of this. I think about what Ethan said in the stairwell, that he'd been close enough to move and hadn't, that he'd had to sit with that for 4 days. A person running a game leads with the thing that makes them look good. He led with the apology. The question I can't shake is smaller than it sounds. When Nadia finally texted him, not because she'd resolved the question, but because she'd run out of reasons not to, was that the bravest thing she did, or the most logical? I keep thinking those might be the same thing, in her case. If this one hit somewhere real, I'd genuinely like to know where. Drop it in the comments.